Hi, I'm Linda, 28 years old, and I thought I'd finally found my place in this family. For 6 years, since graduating from college, I'd been the one everyone turned to when money was tight. Medical bills, car repairs, house payments, I covered it all without complaint. I believed my generosity meant I truly belonged there, that I was valued. But as I sat at a restaurant table during my father's 60th birthday celebration, watching my mother's face contort into something cruel, I realized how wrong I was. The woman who raised me was about to say something that would shatter every illusion I had about family loyalty. Before I tell you what happened that night, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit the like button and subscribe if you want to know how one sentence changed everything between my mother and me forever. Now, let me take you back to that dinner table where my world changed. Growing up as the middle child between two brothers wasn't easy. Tom was 3 years older, the exemplary boy who could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. Gary was 2 years younger, the youngest who could do anything he wanted. And I was just Linda, lost in the middle, constantly trying to prove I deserved the same attention and love they seemed to earn so easily. From elementary school through high school, I dedicated myself to my studies, while Tom played soccer, and Gary charmed everyone with his humor. I studied, always made the honor roll, participated in the debate club, and volunteered at the local library. I believed that if I tried harder and achieved more, my mother would finally see me the way she saw my brothers. Financial hardship began when I was 15. My father's construction company fell on hard times during the recession. I watched my parents whisper worriedly about bills at the kitchen table. I saw my mother's face when she had to tell us we wouldn't have enough money for new school clothes that year. Tom was already in college on a partial soccer scholarship, but even that didn't cover everything. That's when I decided my future. I would study finance, earn a good living, and ensure my family never struggled again. I spent my last 2 years of high school working part-time at a local diner, saving every penny for college while maintaining my 4.0 GPA. A full scholarship to the state university was my reward. Finally, I'd done something that made my dad beam with pride and made my mom reluctantly admit I was smart. But even then, I noticed she always had reservations. Linda is smart, but she doesn't have Tom's leadership skills. She's driven, but she's not as naturally talented as Gary. College was where I truly found myself. Finance always made sense to me. The numbers were clear in a way that human relationships never were. By my 3rd year, I was already tutoring other students and landed an internship at a local investment firm. It was also during this period that I received my first call. "Linda, honey, your dad's truck broke down, and we can't afford the repairs. I know you're still in college," but I didn't hesitate. I sent $500 from my tutoring earnings, money I'd saved for books. When my mom called again 2 months later about an unexpected medical bill, I sent another $300. Then came the mortgage payment they were behind on, and then Gary's car insurance. By my senior year, I was sending home almost half of my intern salary. My roommates went out on the weekends, while I worked longer hours to cover my family's needs and my own expenses. I told myself it was temporary, that once I graduated and got a real job, everything would balance out. But things never worked out. After graduation, I landed a job as a financial analyst with a good starting salary. Instead of feeling relief, the financial demands increased. Now that I had a real job, my family's expectations grew. My dad needed a new truck for work. The house needed a new roof. Gary wanted to go to community college, but didn't qualify for financial aid. I accepted everything. Every request was presented as temporary, an emergency, a one-time favor. I lived in a tiny apartment while sending money for house repairs. I drove a 10-year-old Honda while making payments on my dad's truck. I bought groceries on sale, but paid for expensive dinners for the family when I visited. The pattern was so gradual, I barely noticed it forming. I became the family's cash machine, the reliable, responsible daughter who seemed to have everything under control. What I didn't have was a life of my own, but I told myself that sacrifices were the true form of love. 6 months ago, Everything changed when my father developed chest pains at work. The ambulance ride, the emergency room visit, and the heart tests revealed multiple blocked arteries, requiring immediate surgery. The medical bills were exorbitant, even with insurance. Without hesitation, I emptied my savings account and took out a personal loan to cover the costs. During my father's recovery, I visited him every weekend, bringing groceries and helping with the housework. It was during one of these visits that my mother mentioned my father's 60th birthday. She seemed stressed about not being able to afford a proper celebration. "Don't worry about it," I told her. "Let me take care of everything." I researched restaurants for weeks and finally settled on Meridian, an upscale steakhouse downtown. I made reservations for 8 people, arranged flowers, and even coordinated with the staff for a special birthday dessert. The cost would be significant, but seeing my father happy after such a difficult year seemed worth any price. When I called to confirm the details, I told my mother I would handle the bill, but suggested we present it as a family gift to Dad. I didn't want him to feel guilty about the expense, especially after all the medical costs. "That's very generous, Linda," my mother said, but her tone was flat, almost resentful. At the time, I assumed she was simply stressed about my father's health. Now, looking back, I realized that was the beginning of the end. On the evening of my father's birthday, I arrived at Meridian 30 minutes early to confirm arrangements with the staff. The restaurant was elegant, but not overly formal, with warm lighting and mahogany furniture. I had requested a private area, and the hostess led me to a beautiful corner with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The fresh flowers were on the table exactly as I had arranged. The sommelier approached to discuss the wine options, and I chose a bottle of my father's favorite Cabernet Sauvignon, despite the $80 price tag. Everything had to be perfect. My family arrived together, a coordinated unit, from which I was somehow always separated. My father looked dapper in the navy blazer I bought him for Christmas, and its color was much better than it had been months ago. My mother wore her best dress, the burgundy one with pearl buttons, and had clearly put time into her hair and makeup. Tom arrived with his wife Sarah and their 2 children, Emma, 8, and Jake, 6. He had gained weight since his football days, but still carried that confident air that had always made him his mother's favorite. Sarah looked impeccable, as always, with a designer handbag and well-manicured nails, supported by Tom's salary from his middle management position at the insurance company. Gary came alone, having broken up with his last girlfriend the month before. At 26, he was still finding his feet, working part-time at a sporting goods store while supposedly pursuing his music career. His charm was still intact, making everyone laugh within minutes of sitting down. And then there was me, Linda, 28, and single after my relationship with Marcus ended 3 months earlier. He had said I was too focused on other people's problems to pay attention to our relationship. At the time, I was irritated by his selfishness. Now, sitting alone while my brothers were with their families, his words stung with an uncomfortable truth. "Beautiful. This place is fancy," Gary whistled, looking around the restaurant. "It must be costing someone a fortune," Gary commented. "It's Dad's 60th birthday," I replied simply. "He deserves something special." My mother's face hardened almost imperceptibly. "Well, some of us believe in living within our means," she said. It sounded like a slight taunt, but I ignored it. This night was about my father, not my mother's mood. As we settled in, I noticed my mother positioning herself at the far end of the table, away from me. My father was at the head, smiling happily at having the whole family together. The children chattered excitedly about the cloth napkins and various silverware at each place setting. The waiter approached with the menus, and I glanced at him, nodding discreetly. We'd already agreed that he'd take care of the bill when the time came. I'd already provided my credit card information to avoid any awkward payment moments. "Should we start with some wine?" I suggested, knowing my father would appreciate the gesture. "The wine looks perfect," he agreed, his eyes narrowing with mirth. "It's a pleasure to have everyone together like this," he said excitedly. But as the evening wore on, I began to notice my mother's comments becoming sharper. When I mentioned my recent promotion to senior analyst, she commented, "It must be nice to have all that extra money to throw around." When the appetizers arrived and I suggested we order some to share, she added, "I suppose being single and without any real responsibilities, you can afford to be generous." Each comment was accompanied by a smile, coded in language that could be interpreted as an innocent observation. But the underlying message was clear. I was being criticized for the very financial stability that had sustained the family for years. Dad seemed oblivious to the tensions in the air, lost in his joy at the celebration. Tom and Gary laughed along with my mother's comments, dismissing them as friendly family jokes. But I felt each comment as a small cut, with the cumulative effect becoming something much more painful. When the main course arrived, the conversation turned to family memories, with everyone sharing stories about their father's life and achievements. It should have been heartwarming, but my mother's comments continued to poison the atmosphere for me. When Tom told a story about how Dad taught him to drive, my mother added, "He was always so patient with boys. Girls are different, more complicated." When Gary shared a memory about Dad going to her high school concerts, she said, "Your dad always made a point of being there for what really mattered. Not everyone appreciates that kind of dedication." I tried to contribute my own memories, but each attempt was ignored or somehow turned into criticism. When I mentioned that Dad had driven 4 hours to my college graduation, my mother responded, "Well, he felt obligated. You were always so demanding of his attention." The wine was flowing freely now, and with each glass, my mother's self-control seemed to weaken. Her comments became more direct, less disguised as casual observations. "Linda always thinks she knows best," she said when I suggested we order dessert. "Must have to do with spending so much time with numbers instead of people." Tom laughed. "She was always the serious one. Remember how she used to make spreadsheets to keep track of, her allowance?" "I was 10, I said quietly, feeling my cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Even then, she was obsessed with money," Gary added. Apparently thinking I was being funny, I looked around the table, seeing the dynamic clearly for the first time. I was the outsider, the one they could safely mock because I never fought back. The responsible one, the reliable one, the one who paid for everything while being treated like the family joke. Dad must have sensed my discomfort, because he tried to redirect the conversation. "Linda has done very well for herself. We're proud of her success." But my mother wasn't finished. "Success," she repeated, as if the word tasted bitter. "I suppose that's one way of looking at it, though. I've always believed there's more to life than just making money." The implication was clear. I was shallow, materialistic, missing what really mattered. This coming from the woman whose medical bills I'd paid, whose mortgage I'd helped cover, and whose family, dinners I was currently financing. I felt my patience begin to fray, but I held my tongue. It was Dad's birthday. I wasn't going to ruin it by starting a fight. The waiter approached with the wine list, asking if we'd like another bottle. I was about to agree when my mother spoke. "I think we've had enough. Some of us have to work tomorrow." She looked at me directly. "Although, I suppose when you make enough money, you can take time off whenever you want." That wasn't even true. I worked longer hours than anyone else in my company, taking on extra projects to advance my career and maintain the income that supported not only me, but increasingly my family. "Actually, I've been working 60 hours a week," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. The promotion brought additional responsibilities. 60 hours? Tom whistled. "No wonder you're still single. Who has time for a relationship working like this?" Sarah nudged him, acknowledging the insensitivity of the comment, but the damage was already done. The breakup with Marcus was still fresh, and hearing it at the family dinner table felt particularly cruel. My mother seized the moment. "That's exactly what I mean. Linda is so focused on her career that she's missing out on what really matters. Family, relationships, a normal life." I stared at her across the table. This woman who raised me, wondering how she could be so blind to the irony of her words. I was missing out on a normal life precisely because I was so focused on caring for this family. But still, I said nothing. I smiled tightly and picked up my wine glass, counting the minutes until dinner was over. The tension reached breaking point when the waiter brought Dad's birthday cake, a rich chocolate creation with "Happy 60th Birthday" written in elegant calligraphy. Dad's face lit up with genuine joy as we sang, and for a moment, the previous tension dissipated into the background. "Make a wish, Daddy," Emma shouted, clapping her hands. Daddy closed his eyes, made his wish, and blew out the candles to enthusiastic applause. The moment felt pure, untainted by the undercurrents that had built throughout the night. "Time for presents," Sarah announced, picking up a carefully wrapped package from Tom's family. The gifts were thoughtful but modest. Tom and Sarah gave Dad a nice polo shirt and a book on woodworking. Gary presented a framed photo of himself and Dad, taken on a fishing trip last summer. The kids had made handmade cards, which Dad cherished as much as any other gift. I saved my gift for last, both because I wanted it to be special and because I was nervous about the family's reaction. The watch had cost more than all the other gifts combined, but when I saw Dad admiring it in the jewelry store window months earlier, I knew it would be perfect. "This is from me, Dad," she said, sliding the small velvet box across the table. Dad opened it carefully, and his breath caught when he saw the Omega Seamaster inside. It was a beautiful watch, classic and elegant, with a navy blue dial that matched his favorite blazer. "Beautiful," he whispered, his eyes filling with tears. "This is too much. I can't take this." "You can and you will," she said firmly. "You've worked your whole life, Daddy. You deserve something beautiful." He lifted the watch with reverent hands, and I helped him fasten it onto his wrist. The fit was perfect, and the watch looked distinctive against his tanned skin. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Thank you, daughter. I'll keep it forever." But as I looked around the table, I realized my gift had created an awkward moment. The presence of all the other gifts suddenly seemed inadequate in comparison, and the disparity in cost was obvious to everyone. Gary let out a low whistle. "Wow, Linda. That's a real watch." "Language, Gary," Sarah scolded automatically, looking at the children. Tom was watching the clock with visible envy. "That must have cost a fortune." "No matter what it cost," I replied, but I could feel the atmosphere at the table shift. My mother's face hardened into something cold and calculating. I could see her mind processing the implications of my expensive gift. I could almost see the gears turning in her head. "Well," she finally said, her voice filled with false sweetness, "I suppose when you don't have a husband or children to support, you can afford to spend money on whatever you want." The sentence felt like a physical blow. Not only was she belittling the gift I had given Dad, but she was also highlighting my single, childless status as a personal failing. Dad tried to intervene. "Margaret, that's enough. Linda gave me a wonderful gift, and I'm grateful." But my mother wasn't finished. She'd been building all this up all night, and now she was ready to pounce. "Oh, I'm sure you're grateful, Robert. Linda's always been very good at buying affection." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Everyone at the table understood the implication that my generosity wasn't genuine love, but some kind of manipulation or attempt to buy approval. I felt my world spin. This was my mother, the woman who raised me, and she was suggesting that every sacrifice I made for this family was somehow calculated and selfish. "That's not fair," I said softly, my voice almost unsteady. "Isn't it?" My mother's disguise was slipping now, revealing something ugly underneath. "You throw money at everyone like you're doing them a huge favor, but what you're really doing is showing off, making others feel small." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. 6 years of sending money home, covering medical bills, mortgage payments, and car repairs, and she was framing it all as vanity. "I never made anyone feel small," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I just wanted to help. Help, she repeated, mocking. Right. Help. She took another sip of wine, and I could see she no longer cared about the consequences. You know what I think, Linda? She leaned forward, her voice now a cruel whisper that seemed to carry more weight than any shout. I think you use money to control people, to make yourself feel important. The restaurant seemed to disappear around us. The conversations of other diners became mere background noise. All I could hear was my mother's voice, sharp and cruel, shattering any illusions I had about my place in this family. Dad looked between us with growing despair. Margaret, please. Not today. But my mother was beyond control. She'd been holding all this in for months, maybe years. And now, it was spilling out. No, Robert. She needs to hear this. Linda thinks she's so much better than all of us just because she has money. She makes us feel like we should be grateful for every little thing she does. I was shaking now. Years of pent-up pain and anger were coming to the surface. Every little thing. My voice came out louder than I intended, and I noticed other restaurant patrons starting to look our way. I paid for Dad's surgery. I've been covering his mortgage for 2 years. I'm paying for this dinner now. My mother's eyes shone with something like triumph. She had managed to provoke me and make me lose my composure at Dad's birthday dinner. There it is, she said with satisfaction. The truth has come out. You count every penny, don't you? Every favor cataloged. Every dollar spent is placed on our heads. That's not true, I said desperately, looking around the table for support. But Tom and Gary were staring at their plates, unwilling to get involved. Sarah was focused on keeping the kids distracted. Dad seemed paralyzed, but he was visibly shocked. My mother leaned forward even further, her voice lower now, but with more venom. You want to know what I really think, Linda? I think you're pathetic. A lonely, bitter woman who can't buy the love she never earned naturally. The words hit me like punches, but she wasn't finished. You sit there in your expensive clothes, showing off your money, thinking that makes you special. But you know what? You're not even part of this family. She said the last words with a cruel laugh, as if the idea of me belonging was absurd. The restaurant fell silent around our table. Even the ambient noise seemed to fade as her words echoed in my mind. You're not even part of this family. Everything stopped. My heart, my breathing, my ability to think clearly. The woman who gave birth to me, who raised me for 18 years, had just declared that I didn't belong. Time seemed suspended in that moment after my mother's words. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, felt the blood drain from my face as the full weight of what she had said fell upon me. You're not even part of this family. Around the table, everyone was frozen. Dad's face was pale, his mouth slightly open in shock. Tom and Gary were staring at my mother with expressions of disbelief. Sarah covered Emma's ears, trying to shield the children from the ugliness of what was happening. But my mother looked pleased, almost triumphant. She had finally said what she'd seemingly been thinking for years, and the relief on her face was unmistakable. The anger building inside me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. It started as a cold knot in my stomach and spread like wildfire, consuming every rational thought. 6 years of sacrifice, of putting my family's needs before my own, of working 60 hours a week to support people who saw me as an outsider. I thought about my small studio apartment, furnished with hand-me-downs because I was sending money home instead of building a real life for myself. I thought about Marcus, who had left me because I was constantly stressed about the family's financial crises, always choosing their needs over our relationship. I thought about the watch on Dad's wrist, bought with money I had earned after countless late nights and weekend projects. I thought about the medical bills I had paid without question, the mortgage payments I had covered without complaint, the credit card debt I had taken on to keep this family afloat, and I thought about sitting alone in that restaurant, the outsider at my own father's birthday celebration, being called not part of the family by those I supported. The clarity that came with anger was almost crystal clear. For the first time in my adult life, I saw my family dynamics with perfect, painful honesty. I wasn't the beloved daughter who helped out occasionally. I was the family's cash machine, valued only for what I could offer, even resented for it. My mother was watching me, waiting for my reaction. Maybe she expected tears, or an outburst of anger that would paint me as the unstable one in the story. Maybe she thought I would apologize, try to make amends like I always had before. But instead, I reached for my wine glass with a firm hand. The action seemed to surprise her. I could see the confusion flash across her face as I raised the glass, holding it eye level, as if to toast. "Perfect," I said, my voice calm and clear despite the chaos raging inside me. "Then don't ask me for any more money." The words fell silently like stones in still water, creating shockwaves that spread across every face at the table. My mother's expression changed instantly. The triumphant satisfaction vanished, replaced by something that resembled panic. For the first time, she seemed to understand the implications of what she had just said. "Beautiful," she began, but I held up my free hand to stop her from continuing. "No, Mom, you're absolutely right. If I'm not part of this family, then I have no obligations to this family anymore." I took a sip of wine, savoring both the taste and the growing panic on my mother's face. Dad was the first to find his voice. "Linda, honey, your mom didn't mean it like that. She's just upset about something. That's not what any of us want." But I was looking at my mother, watching the color drain from her cheeks as she began to calculate what my words meant. "You didn't mean it, Mom?" I asked with sly gentleness, because it sounded like you'd been thinking about it for a long time. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I continued, my voice growing stronger with each sentence. "Because if I'm not part of this family, then I should stop acting like I am. I should stop paying for family dinners like this. I should stop covering mortgage payments, medical bills, and car repairs." Tom and Gary glanced back and forth between my mother and me, finally beginning to understand the extent of my financial contributions to the family. "I should stop taking midnight calls when someone urgently needs money," I continued. "I should stop working overtime to cover for everyone else. I should start living like the selfish, money-obsessed person you seem to think I am." "Linda, please," my mother whispered, her voice barely audible. But I wasn't finished. 6 years of pent-up resentment were coming out now, and I couldn't stop even if I wanted to. "You know what's funny, Mom? You're right about one thing. I do keep track of the money. So let me share some numbers with everyone." I looked around the table, making eye contact with each family member in turn. $18,000 for Dad's medical bills, $12,000 in mortgage payments over the past 2 years, $8,000 for Tom's car when it was repossessed, $6,000 for Gary's community college tuition, which he never finished, $4,000 for the new roof, $3,000 for the heating repair last winter. With each number, my mother's face grew paler, and my siblings' expressions grew more and more shocked. That dinner tonight, $350, including wine and tip, all paid for by someone who isn't even family. The restaurant was now completely silent. Even the other diners had stopped talking, sensing the drama unfolding at our table. My mother tried again, her voice desperate. "Linda, I was just upset. I didn't mean—" "You meant it," I said firmly. "And you know what? You're right. I tried to buy love, to try to earn my place in this family with money. But you can't buy something that was never for sale." I stood up slowly, my legs surprisingly steady despite the emotional earthquake I was experiencing. The restaurant around us remained silent, other diners trying to pretend they weren't watching, but clearly absorbed in the family. Drama unfolding at our table. "Where are you going?" Dad asked, panic starting to creep into his voice. "I'm going home," he said simply. "But first, I need to take care of something." I glanced at the waiter and motioned for him to come over. He approached cautiously, clearly aware that something significant was happening at our table. "I need to change the payment method," I said quietly. "Please remove my credit card from the account." The waiter looked nervously around the table, unsure how to handle the situation. "Madam, your card is already registered for the entire account. Then please remove it and bring separate accounts for everyone," he said firmly. My mother's face went from pale to gray. "Linda, don't be ridiculous. We can work this out." But I was already pulling my wallet out of my purse, pulling out the credit card I'd planned to use for the family celebration. The waiter took it hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable with the tension emanating from our table. "Actually," I said, reconsidering, "just bring my separate account. The rest of the family can figure out how to split theirs." The implications of my words fell across the table like a physical force. This wasn't just about dinner. This was about the end of my financial support, the end of my role as the family's safety net. Tom was the first to really understand. "Linda, wait. Let's talk about this. Mom overreacted, but we can work it out." "Can we?" I asked, turning to him. "Because I don't think this just happened today, Tom. I think this is how you've all been feeling for a long time." Gary was frantically calculating in his head, probably trying to figure out how much money I'd contributed to his life over the years. His part-time job at the sporting goods store barely covered his rent, let alone his other expenses. "Oh, come on, Linda," he said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow. "We're family. Families fight sometimes. It doesn't mean anything." "It means everything," I replied. "It means I finally understand my place with all of you. Dad was desperately trying to save the situation. Your mother has been under a lot of stress lately. The medical bills, the recovery, all the changes. She's not thinking clearly." "Dad," I said softly, my heart breaking a little at the pain in his eyes. "The medical bills I've paid. The financial stress I've been covering for years. Mom isn't upset about the financial pressure. She's upset that I exist." I looked directly at my mother, who was staring at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. "Isn't that right, Mom? You resented every dollar I sent, every bill I paid, every time I helped this family, not because you didn't need the help, but because needing it made you feel small." When she finally looked up, there were tears in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. The moment for sympathy had passed, when she declared that I wasn't part of the family. "You want to know what the real problem is?" I continued. "It's not that I have money. It's that I have independence. It's that I've built a life for myself, instead of getting married and having kids, like you think I should have. It's that I've succeeded in ways that bother you." "That's not true," she whispered. "Isn't it?" I asked. "Because from my perspective, it feels like you've been punishing me for not fitting into your idea of what a daughter should be." The waiter returned with the separate bills, discreetly placing mine next to my plate and leaving the remaining bill in the center of the table. The amount was significant. I could see it in my siblings' expressions as they glanced at the total. "I can't afford this," Gary said quietly, the reality of the situation starting to sink in. "Neither do we," Tom added, looking at Sarah with growing panic. "With the kids' expenses and everything." Dad pulled out his wallet, but I could tell by his expression that he was calculating whether his fixed income would cover an unexpected $300 dinner. "That's exactly what I'm talking about," I said, pulling enough cash from my wallet to cover my share, plus a generous tip. For 6 years, I was the solution to problems like this. Well, since I'm not part of the family, it's not my problem anymore. My mother was crying openly now, mascara running down her cheeks. "Linda, please. I was wrong to say what I said. I was angry and I let it out. But you can't just abandon your family over one mistake." "A mistake?" I repeated, incredulous. "Mom, that wasn't a mistake. That was you finally saying what you thought all along." I put the money on the table and grabbed my purse. The weight of 6 years of family obligations was lifting from my shoulders, leaving me simultaneously lighter and more alone than I'd ever felt before. "I want everyone to understand one thing," he said, looking around the table for the last time. "I never threw money to show off or make anyone feel small. I helped because I loved you, because I thought that was what family does for each other. But love has to be reciprocated." Dad stood up, reaching for my arm. Please don't leave like that. It's my birthday. We can work this out. I hugged him gently, breathing in the familiar scent of his perfume. Happy birthday, Dad. I hope the watch brings you joy for many years to come. Beautiful, he begged. I love you, Daddy. I always will. But I can't keep pretending that sending money home is the same thing as being loved in return. I kissed her cheek and took a step back. My decision was made. I hope everyone figures out how to pay for dinner, he said to the table in general. And I hope they figure out how to pay for everything else, too. With that, I pushed away from the table, walked across the restaurant, past the curious glances of the other diners, and out into the fresh night air. For the first time in 6 years, I was truly free. The drive home was surreal. I expected to feel guilt or regret for leaving during Dad's birthday dinner, but instead, I felt something I barely recognized: relief. Pure, overwhelming relief that I'd finally stood up for myself. My phone started ringing before I reached my apartment. Dad's number appeared on the screen. Then Tom's, then Gary's. I let them all go to my inbox. Whatever they had to say could wait until I processed what had just happened. My studio apartment felt different when I walked in. The same hand-me-down furniture, the same cramped space, but somehow, it felt more like home than ever. This was my space, paid for with my money, decorated with my choices. No family obligations looming over every decision. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my small sofa, finally allowing myself to fully absorb the evening's events. 6 years of financial support ended with a single sentence from my mother. 6 years of sacrifice, of putting the family's needs before my own, dismissed as selfishness and showing off. The phone rang again. My mother's number this time. I stared at the phone for several rings before declining the call. The voicemails began piling up quickly. Dad's first message was a desperate, begging message. Linda, honey, please call me back. Your mother is devastated. She knows she made a terrible mistake. We can work this out. Please don't let one bad night destroy our family. Tom's message was more practical, more desperate. Linda, I don't know what happened there, but we need to talk. I had no idea you were covering so many of Mom and Dad's expenses. We need to figure this out. Gary's was shorter, more emotional. I messed up, Linda. We all do. I never realized how much you've done for all of us. Please call me back. But it was my mother's message that revealed the most. Linda, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. I said terrible things tonight, things I didn't mean. But please, we need to talk. Dad's surgery bills aren't the only debts we have. We owe money on the house, the cars, the credit cards we use for everyday expenses. Without your help, I don't know how we'll make it. Please, honey, forgive me. I listened to the message 3 times, each time hearing something new, revealing new layers of manipulation. Even in her apology, my mother was focusing on what my withdrawal of support would cost them, not the pain her words had caused me. The following days were a constant barrage of calls, texts, and emails. Dad called every morning and night, his voice growing more strained with each message. Tom and Gary took turns trying different approaches: blame, anger, negotiation, pleading. But it was my mother's silence that spoke loudest. After that first desperate message, nothing. No apology, no attempt to make amends, no acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused. Her silence confirmed what I'd already suspected. She didn't regret what she'd said, only the consequences. A week after dinner, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable before my mother's announcement. I booked a trip to Hawaii, something I'd put off for years, because there was always a family financial crisis demanding my attention. The travel agent was surprised at how quickly I made the decisions. First-class tickets, an oceanfront hotel, a full spa package. For the first time in my adult life, I was spending money on myself without considering how it would affect my family support budget. That's a real luxury, the agent commented as she processed my credit card. I'm celebrating my independence, I told her. The trip was a revelation. 10 days of beaches, spa treatments, and fine dining. 10 days without checking my phone every hour for financial emergency calls from home. I read novels on the beach, took sunset walks along the coast, and had conversations with strangers who knew nothing about my family obligations. On the flight back, I felt like a different person. Tanned, relaxed, and, most importantly, confident in my worth as an individual, not as a financial asset. The transformation didn't go unnoticed by my coworkers. My boss, Jennifer, commented on my improved focus and energy at our next team meeting. "Whatever you did on vacation, keep doing it," she said. "Your performance has been exceptional since you got back." It turns out that not being constantly stressed about family finances was good for my career. Who knew? 3 months after Dad's birthday dinner, the full consequences of my withdrawal of family financial support began to sink in. The calls continued, becoming increasingly desperate as bills fell due, and the family realized I hadn't been joking when I'd talked about stopping my support. Dad's first call came when the mortgage payment was due. His voice was shaky, older somehow. "Linda, I hate to ask, but we're behind on our mortgage payment this month. Could you help us out one more time? I know things ended badly at dinner, but this is about keeping a roof over our heads." I listened to the entire message twice before deleting it. The old Linda would have transferred the money immediately, worked overtime to cover the shortfall. The new Linda recognized the manipulation when she heard it. Tom called when his own financial house of cards began to crumble. Apparently, he was counting on my support more than I realized. "Linda, I don't know how to say this, but I might lose my car. I've been behind on payments for months, and I was counting on asking for your help like always." He paused before continuing. "I know Mom overstepped, but you can't punish me for what she said." But I wasn't punishing anyone. I simply wasn't allowing a dysfunctional dynamic that was hurting us all. Gary's situation was the most predictable. Without my financial support, his part-time income couldn't sustain his lifestyle. He'd been evicted from his apartment and was living on friends' couches. "I get it, okay?" His voicemail said. "You're mad at Mom, and you should be. But I'm going to be homeless, Linda. I'm your brother. Doesn't that mean anything?" It meant everything, and that's precisely why I couldn't continue to allow his refusal to take responsibility for his own life. The most revealing conversation came from an unexpected source. Tom's wife, Sarah. She called me one afternoon at work, her normally composed voice strained with stress. "Linda, I need you to understand something. Tom has been lying to me about our finances for years. I thought we were doing fine, but apparently he's been relying on your money to cover basic expenses. I had no idea. I'm sorry, Sarah. I never meant for my support to cause problems in your marriage. That's not why I'm calling," she said firmly. "I'm calling because I think you did the right thing by stepping away. Tom needs to learn to handle his responsibilities. We both need to learn." Her words meant more to me than she could have known. Finally, someone in my family was recognizing that my withdrawal wasn't cruelty, but necessity. "How are the kids handling all this?" I asked, genuinely, concerned for Emma and Jake. "They're doing well. Better than well, actually. Tom's been spending more time with them since he can't go out with his friends as much. A positive, I guess." The conversation with Sarah gave me hope that something good could come from this difficult situation. But the most significant change was in myself. Freed from the constant pressure of family financial obligations, I was thriving in ways I never imagined possible. My work performance improved dramatically, resulting in another promotion and a significant salary increase. I started dating again, meeting people through work and social activities, instead of always being too stressed and tired to commit to a relationship. The difference was remarkable. Without the constant worry of family crises, I was more present, more engaged, and more capable of forming genuine connections. I also started therapy, something I'd been putting off for years because I was too busy dealing with other people's problems to take care of my own. Dr. Patricia Chen became an essential guide in helping me understand the family dynamics that shaped my adult life. "You've been functioning as the parentified daughter," she explained during one of our sessions. Taking on adult responsibilities and emotional burdens that weren't yours to carry. Your mother's resentment likely stems from the fact that your competence highlighted her feelings of inadequacy. The realization was both painful and liberating. I began to understand that my mother's cruelty wasn't about my flaws, but about her insecurities and the power dynamics within the family system. 4 months after dinner, Dad finally called with a different message. "Linda, I need to tell you something. Your mother and I are in therapy. She's been working on issues with self-esteem and family dynamics. She wants to apologize to you properly when you're ready to hear it." I was grateful for Dad's message, but I wasn't ready yet. The pain was still too fresh. The patterns were too ingrained. Real change would take time to materialize. 6 months after that fateful dinner, Mom finally contacted me with a letter instead of a phone call. The handwritten pages arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, and I left them on the kitchen counter for 3 days before I found the courage to read them. "Dear Linda," the letter began, "I know I have no right to expect you to read this, much less to respond to me, but I must try to explain and, more importantly, apologize for the terrible things I said to you." The letter was 5 pages long, detailing Mom's journey through therapy and her growing understanding of how her own insecurities had poisoned our relationship. She wrote about feeling inadequate as a mother, especially compared to what she saw as my competence and success. "I was envious of you," she admitted. "Envious of your independence, your success, your ability to solve problems that left your father and me feeling powerless. Instead of being proud of the strong woman I raised, I resented you for being everything I felt I wasn't." She acknowledged the years of financial support I had provided and the sacrifice it required. "I now know that every dollar you sent home represented hours of your life, opportunities you forfeited, dreams you postponed. Instead of being grateful, I was resentful. I weaponized your generosity against you, and I can never forgive myself for that." The apology seemed genuine, but it was the acknowledgement of the harm that meant the most. "I know I can't take back what I said. I know I can't undo the years I made you feel like your love wasn't enough. But I want you to know that I understand now. You never tried to buy our love. You were trying to show off yours." She ended the letter with a promise, not a request. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to be the way you were before. But I promise that if you ever decide to give me another chance, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be the mother you always deserved." I read the letter several times over the course of a few days. Each reading revealed new layers of meaning and emotion. In therapy, Dr. Chen helped me process my feelings about Mom's apology and what it might mean for our future. "Apologies are important," she said, "but they're only the beginning. Real change requires sustained effort and behavioral modification over time." I decided to write a response, but I kept my response short and to a clear boundary. "Mom, I received your letter and appreciate your honesty about therapy and your insights. I'm glad you're working to understand these patterns. However, I need more time before I'm ready to rebuild our relationship. When I am ready, it will need to be a completely different dynamic than we had before." I didn't mention money or financial support. That conversation would come later, if it came to that. Meanwhile, my life continued to improve in ways I never anticipated. A promotion at work came with opportunities to travel and lead major projects. I was featured in a financial industry magazine as a rising star, something that would have been impossible when I was constantly distracted by family crises. My love life also blossomed. I met David at a work conference, and our relationship developed naturally, uninterrupted by family financial emergencies. He was a marketing executive with his own demanding career, and he understood my professional ambitions in a way Marcus never had. "You seem so centered," David commented after 2 months of dating. "Like, you really know who you are and what you want." I'd never seen myself that way before, but he was right. For the first time in my adult life, I was living according to my own priorities, instead of constantly reacting to other people's crises. The family's financial situation continued to deteriorate without my support, But it also forced everyone to make long-delayed changes. Dad started consulting to supplement his retirement. Tom finally had honest conversations with Sarah about their finances and began budgeting properly. Gary found a full-time job and moved into a smaller, more affordable apartment. Were they struggling? Yes. But they were also growing, learning to handle their own responsibilities instead of relying on me to solve their problems. The family's first contact after Mom's letter came from an unexpected source. My niece Emma, now 9. She called me on a Saturday afternoon. Her voice young, uncertain, but determined. "Aunt Linda, it's Emma. I'm calling because I miss you and want to know if you're okay." The innocence of her concern almost broke my heart. "I'm doing very well, dear. And you?" "I am fine. Mom and Dad explained that Grandma said some cruel things to you, and that's why you don't come to family dinners anymore. I just wanted you to know that I love you." I often reflected on how children, in simple ways, understood what adults complicated. "I love you, too, Emma. More than you know. Will you come to my birthday party next month? I promise Grandma will be nice." The invitation was touching, but I wasn't ready for family gatherings yet. "I can't go to the party, but how about you and I have our own celebration, just the two of us?" Her excitement was contagious. "Seriously? Can we go to that place with the huge sundaes?" "For sure." That afternoon with Emma was a turning point. She talked about school, her friends, her latest art projects, treating me like the dear aunt I'd always been. She didn't care about money, family dynamics, or adult complications. She loved me for who I was. "Are you ever going to family dinners again?" she asked as I drove her home. "Maybe someday," I replied truthfully. "But some things need to change first." "Like what?" "How people need to learn to treat each other kindly, even when they're upset about other things." She nodded seriously. "That makes sense. From the mouths of children, as always. Amal." Year after Dad's birthday dinner, I received a call I'd both expected and dreaded. Dad's voice was strained, older than his 61 years. "Linda, I need to tell you something. Your mother had a heart attack yesterday. She's in the hospital, and the doctors said she'll be fine, but it was serious." My first impulse was to ask about insurance, bills, and whether they needed financial help. But I held back. That wasn't my role anymore. "I'm sorry to hear that, Dad. How are you?" I asked. "I'm scared," he admitted. "And I keep thinking about how things have been between all of us this past year. Life is too short for this kind of separation." I drove to the hospital that night, the first time I'd seen my parents in 12 months. Dad looked exhausted. The worry lines deepened his face, but he brightened when he saw me, pulling me into a tight hug. "Thank you for coming," he whispered. Mom was awake when I entered the room. The year of separation had changed her as much as it had changed me. She seemed smaller somehow, more fragile, but also calmer. "Beautiful," she said softly. "I didn't know if you would come." "You're my mother," I replied simply. Of course I came. We talked for an hour, carefully avoiding the topics that had driven us apart. She asked me about my work, my life, my happiness. I asked about her recovery, her plans, her needs. It wasn't the reunion either of us could have imagined, but it was a start. As I prepared to leave, Mom held my hand. "I've been thinking about what I said that night at dinner," she said. "About you not being part of the family. It was the cruelest thing I've ever said, and the most untrue. You're not just part of this family, Linda. You're the heart of it." Tears filled my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition, of finally being seen for who I truly was. "I know," I replied. And I knew. I've always been the heart of the family. The question was whether they deserved that heart. "I don't expect things to go back to the way they were," Mom continued. "The way they were wasn't fair to you, but I hope we can find a new path forward." In the following months, we did just that. Family dinners resumed, but with new rules and dynamics. Everyone contributed what they could, whether financially or with time and effort. I helped when I chose to, not because I was expected to solve every problem. Mom and I went to therapy sessions together, working through decades of complicated family dynamics. It was difficult work, but also healing. Tom and Gary made efforts to rebuild their relationships with me, acknowledging the ways they had taken my support for granted. Their apologies came with behavioral changes, with a genuine effort to be better siblings and more responsible adults. 6 months after Mom's heart attack, we celebrated Dad's 61st birthday at the same restaurant where everything had fallen apart the year before. But this time, everyone contributed to the bill. This time I was there as a beloved daughter, not a financial resource. As we raised our glasses to toast Dad, I caught Mom's eye across the table. She smiled at me, a smile full of love, respect, and genuine appreciation for the woman I had become. "To the family," Dad said, his voice strong and happy. "To the family," we all echoed. But this time, when I said those words, I knew I truly belonged to the family I was toasting. Not because of what I could provide, but because of who I was. The heart attack had been a wake-up call for all of us, but especially for Mom. She realized that pushing away the people who loved her most wasn't protecting her pride. It was destroying her family. My relationship with David continued to blossom. He had been incredibly supportive during the family crisis, understanding that sometimes loving someone means giving them space to heal their other relationships. "You look different than when we first met," he observed one night as we walked through the park near my apartment. "Different how?" "More at peace with yourself, more confident in your worth." He was right. The year of separation from my family taught me that my worth wasn't dependent on what I could do for others. I deserved love simply for being who I was. Work continued to go well. I was promoted again and was now managing a team of analysts. The leadership skills I'd developed over the years, managing family crises, translated well to professional management, but without the emotional manipulation and blame. I also started a financial literacy program for young women, teaching them the skills I'd learned the hard way about budgeting, investing, and maintaining financial boundaries with family. It was deeply rewarding work, allowing me to transform my painful experiences into something positive for others. The most important thing to remember, I told women in my workshops, is that financial support should never come at the expense of your emotional well-being. Generosity is a beautiful thing, but not when it's being exploited. Many of the women shared similar stories to mine, and I was surprised by how often these financial family dynamics repeated themselves. It seemed I wasn't the only daughter expected to sacrifice her own financial security to ensure the family's stability. As the second anniversary of that dinner approached, I found myself reflecting on how completely my life had changed. I was in a healthy relationship, thriving professionally, financially, stable, and, most importantly, at peace with my family relationships. The woman who left that restaurant 2 years earlier was broken and desperate for validation. The woman I became was strong, confident, and clearly knew my worth. This growth didn't come without costs. There were lonely nights, difficult conversations, and moments of doubt about whether I was doing the right thing. But each challenge led to greater strength, greater clarity, and ultimately, greater peace. The final piece of healing came when Mom asked if she could attend one of my financial literacy workshops. "I want to understand what you do," she said, "and I want to learn how to manage my money better, so I never put that kind of burden on you again." Watching my mother take notes as I explained budgeting strategies and investing principles was surreal, but also deeply moving. She was making a genuine effort to understand my world and take responsibility for her own financial future. After the workshop, she remained while the other participants left. "I'm proud of you," she said simply, "not just for what you've accomplished professionally, but for the way you've stood up for yourself. You've taught our entire family how to love better." Those words meant more to me than any amount of money could have. Now, when people ask me about family relationships and financial boundaries, I tell them about that birthday dinner. I talk about leaving a family that took my love for granted, and about the long and difficult process of rebuilding those relationships on healthier terms. Sometimes I say that the most loving thing you can do is refuse to allow dysfunction to continue, even when that dysfunction has become comfortable for everyone involved. The woman who raised her glass that night and said, "Fine, then don't ask me for any more money," wasn't being cruel or vindictive. She finally, after 28 years, stood up for herself. And in doing so, she not only saved herself, but her entire family. Because true love isn't based on what you can offer others. True love is about seeing yourself clearly, accepting each other fully, and choosing to be together freely. That's the kind of family I have now, and that's worth more than all the money in the world. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did you find the courage to prioritize your own well-being? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real stories about family, relationships, and discovering your own strength. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't measured by what they can do for others. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is love yourself enough to demand better treatment. Until next time, take care of yourself and those you love.